Good afternoon. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. I have a great show today. I've got a friend, a colleague, a person that I have watched for seems like a lifetime. I've admired forever. I admire him, his dad, his wife, his children, the family, the idea that they represent and the work that they bring into community and bring into the world. I'm talking about Melvin Carter Jr., and we'll talk about his book and a play of his book that's currently running in St. Paul at the History Theater. First, I want to ask you to join this work, support this program, The Conversation with Al McFarlane, by going over to YouTube's Insight News channel. YouTube Insight News channel. So you might be connecting right now either at Black Press USA on YouTube or at Insight News on YouTube. You could be connecting through Facebook. We've got a Facebook Insight channel. There's also a Black Press USA Facebook channel. You could be connecting to us through LinkedIn. We appreciate your presence there. Or you could be getting this program live on Twitter. However you're getting it, we thank you, but we're going to ask you to do one thing to support our ability to capture the numbers and to grow the numbers. We want you to be a subscriber. How do you do that? Go over to Insight News on YouTube, the YouTube Insight News channel, and just click subscribe. It costs you nothing, a second of your time, but it allows you to get notifications every time we go live with the program, and allows us to know how many people are getting the show, sharing the show, and we want to grow the numbers. We're across the 300 number. We want to get to 1,000. Our next goal is to get 400, 500, and you can help us move in that direction right now, today. Also, let people know. Tell your friends, tell your fam that we're having important conversations over here at The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We've got a history of bringing what we call robust conversations forward to the community. Yesterday, for example, we talked with Sister Green, Taisha Green, from the Minneapolis program that's embroiled in controversy right now behind a Black History Month event that had projected getting 20,000 people to show up to support and learn about Black business, Black culture, but actually ended up with far fewer, and a lot of blame going back and forth. The institution blaming the now resigned former director of the program, but she shooting back, saying there's institutional structural failure. The city itself, and she named the mayor and the head of operations and the president of city council and a city council member in particular as being obstructive and, in a sense, laying the blame for the failure of their event at their feet. Well, that's what I call robust conversation. Her story hasn't been shared as fully as we did. That's what we do here. We want you to be supportive and engage in that kind of work. Well, we also start off every day with what we call hot topics. We've got several to go into before I bring in my friend Melvin Carter Jr. The first, you can read the story at the our website. It's a new piece that comes from Associated Press. Again, we've posted this story at insightnews.com, and it's an important story. The story says the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, approves over-the-counter Narcan. And just a couple of paragraphs, it says that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration on Wednesday approved selling the leading version of naloxone. I think I'm saying that the right way, naloxone, without a prescription, setting the overdose reversing drug on course to become the first opioid treatment drug to be sold over the counter. It's a move that some advocates have long sought as a way to improve access to a life-saving drug, though the exact impact will not be clear immediately. Here's what the issues involve. First of all, what is Narcan? The approved nasal spray from Gaithersburg, Maryland-based Emergent Biosolutions is the best known form of naloxone. And I'll end with this. It says it can reverse overdoses of opioids, including street drugs such as heroin and fentanyl, and prescription versions, including oxycodone. Well, why is this important? You know, the country, this community included, perhaps the world, is awash in illegal and dangerous opioid drugs. The opioid epidemic in this country, in this city, and elsewhere is massive. And one of the things people have to do is learn about what can be done to help people when they are at risk of losing life with an overdose. A lot of stories have to do with people buying street drugs, thinking it's one thing, but finding that the drugs are laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl is murderous. It'll kill you. One drop, one dose will kill you. And so it's important that we educate people about the dangers of opioids, but also educate people about how we can react to, respond to, and help save lives. And one of the strategies is this naloxone strategy, the nasal spray that can reverse the impact of an even deadly dose of fentanyl or other opioids. So now that this is going to be available more publicly over the counter, that's a good thing. How ordinary people will get to have it in their possession and be in a position to help others, we don't know that yet, but it's a step in the right direction. Let me know what you think about that, not only about the prevalence of the opioid crisis. When I hear that, I think about Prince and fentanyl and others, but also about this solution, one of the strategies to try to do interventions when people are in danger. So that's one. Let me go to the next of our hot topics today, and that is making reference to the legendary Black lawyer and lobbyist Randall Robinson. Again, this story is in Insight News at our website today, posted today, March 29th. And it says that Randall Robinson, the founding executive director of TransAfrica, whose lobbying efforts in the 1980s heavily influenced America's foreign policy towards South Africa's racist apartheid government, died earlier this week on the Caribbean island of St. Kitts. He's a native of Richmond, Virginia. In 1941, he went to Norfolk State University, which is a historically Black college university, on a basketball scholarship. He graduated from Virginia Union and later graduated from Harvard Law School, focused a legal career on social justice issues, and really informed by his own experiences growing up in the Jim Crow South. One of the things he was known for was his book, The Debt. He was also known because his brother, Max Robinson, was an ABC news anchor. And between the Robinson boys, they were arguably one of the most influential Black families in the country in the 1980s. My personal Randall Robinson story is that he was our guest on this program. The predecessor of it, we called this the Public Policy Forum at Lucille's Kitchen way back in the 80s and 90s, I think, 90s. And he was our guest talking about his book, The Debt. And the power of the presentation we had with him included the fact that we had sent our own editor, Brant Williams, to Germany to interview survivors of the Holocaust who were pursuing reparations from the German government for the theft of life, of property, and of liberty because it occurred as official policy of the state under the Nazi regime. We drew the parallel, he draws the parallel, the theft of life, property, freedom, liberty for Black people was a state-controlled function in the United States of America. Slavery was part of our governance structure, and therefore, this government owes Black people, the enslaved, reparations, just as Germany owed reparations to Jews. Great conversation, a great program. We'll read about it at insightnews.com. And if you haven't done it yet or need to refresh, go get The Debt. It's a powerful book that explains this relationship and the financial side of the relationship between the enslaved, our people, Black people, and the West in general, United States in particular. The final hot topic I'm going to do today is called Delayed, Not Denied, and it's an article about a Vietnam veteran, Colonel Paris Davis, finally receiving a Medal of Honor. Colonel Paris Davis, who was a U.S. Army retired officer, was awarded the Medal of Honor on Friday, March 3rd, 2023 at the White House. He was presented the award by President Joe Biden. The 83-year-old former Green Beret was finally honored for his action in Ben Dinh Province, South Vietnam, on June 18th, 1965. The award came more than half a century after Davis risked his life to save some of his men by fighting off the North Vietnamese. This belated recognition came after the recommendation for his medal was lost, was resubmitted, then lost again. And then finally, in 2016, advocates for Davis's award recreated and resubmitted the paperwork. Finally, Joe Biden told him, "You are everything this medal means. You are everything our nation is at our best. Brave, big-hearted, determined, and devoted, selfless, and steadfast." Well, kudos to brother U.S. Army Colonel Paris Davis, and the countless other men and women who served this country, often without recognition, without praise, and often without properly benefiting from the things they should benefit from after they have served the country, like the GI Bill, like business loans, like home mortgages, and other things. Well, a lot of stuff to think about. I before I go to the last part of the program, I want to again, as yesterday, sort of say a word of condolence and regret and sorrow, reflecting those people killed in Nashville, Tennessee. A shooter who had mental challenges, possessing some 7 guns, entered a school, a parochial school, with 3 weapons, 2 assault rifle type and 1 pistol, and shot and killed 6 people, 3 children, and 3 adults. So our prayers and thoughts and condolences go out to all of them. And we raise the question, when and how will we as a country deal with the question of the availability of guns and the destruction that the use of guns has meant on citizens in community. The final thing is, I want to also say kudos to people in Minnesota and anywhere else who've responded to the crisis that came from the climate event in Mississippi, the tornadoes that destroyed whole towns and left lots of people without shelter and without water. And a number of people here in Twin Cities and others have rallied to provide support, either financial or material, and some volunteer support. Thank you for doing that. But I invite and encourage all of us to pay attention, to connect. And if we have a relative relationship in Mississippi, now's the time to reach out and be supportive to help any way we can. Well, with that, let me bring my guest in today, and that's Melvin Carter Jr. Brother Melvin Carter, good to see you. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. How you doing, man?
I'm good to see. I'm doing good, man. You're looking good. You been in that gym?
Not yet. I need to go.
You look like you've been doing some spring training.
Well, you're reading my mind. It's time to get back. I've been suffering from the COVID 20 and the COVID 40. And the problem is sitting here all day, every day, and being sedentary and eating a lot of food. So I am due for the gym.
You're looking better than you're claiming.
Well, thank you. All right. We're going to do that, though. I'm glad you brought it up, because I like talking about the need for us to pay attention to our bodies, to our physical health and our mental health. We talk about that all the time. And it's particularly important for Black men to focus on being healthy and getting to the gym, getting moving, and keeping our minds tuned up. All of it adds up to being healthy, hopefully wealthy and wise.
And eat them greens, man. You got to eat them greens, man.
Greens, okay, all right. I think once you told me too to also eat some, what did you tell me once way back when? Pumpkin seeds.
Yeah, baby, you got to get that zinc, man.
You remember telling me that?
where all men have a zinc shortage, and one of my chemist friends said it helps keep the lead in the pencil.
Yeah, that's what you told me. So listen,
But they help
let's
also ward off the cold. I had COVID for about 3 days, man. I started popping my zinc pills, and up in a matter of about 3-4 days, I was up tap dancing.
Okay.
Well, tap dancing is an overstatement, but
But you came through it. Came through it strong. Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about a lot of stuff. I got a lot of stuff to talk. I enjoy being with you, man. Just hanging out and talking. I enjoy the work that you've provided and leadership that you provided as a mentor. You are a retired police officer, number one.
Recovering.
Say it again.
Recovering.
A recovering police officer. That's interesting. We'll talk about that. But you also are the epitome of this idea of a son of Rondo. Your family is generations deep in Rondo community.
Yes,
I want to talk about that. So I'm interested in talking about your story personally and how you see yourself and saw yourself coming into the world and how you've captured that in two places. One, the book Diesel Heart, and two, now the play based on the book, a play that's being presented right now at History Theater. I think people got till about April, someday in April, we'll give the date.
April 2nd.
April 2nd. So you got a couple of days to get to it and see it. Okay. All right. So then, so let's start with, the Melvin Carter Jr. story and Diesel Heart. Let's talk about the book first, and the play first, then the book, and then talk about you. So talk about the play at the History Theater. And in talking about it, invite people to show up, buy some tickets, and enjoy.
Buy some tickets.
There we go.
Do it. But what's important to me, there's a lot of most meaningful events in the story. One that's very definitive is when I'm standing in front of my daddy's mama's mama, who was born enslaved. And this is really a factual thing. And back in the early 50s, every year they'd have a family reunion to say goodbye to her. But she lived till like 1967, But I met her, and she and I kind of merged in a way that's mystical. It doesn't make any sense, But the great grandkids were all being paraded before her, and there was no words, but I could sense that she was from some space and time that was beyond my comprehension. And I could feel her probing me and realizing that she would be denied the future that I'd be allowed to see. And we merged in a way that the disconnect was the connect, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, but I seem to be supercharged with a mission in that sense, And so she, at the time of that happened, it was in a sharecropping environment. Mm-hmm. And she was there when during the first Juneteenth,
Mm-hmm.
and so on and on. So I came back to Minnesota. So
well, let's talk about her first. I'm interested in talking about what was her name, where was she born, and what was her origin story, as much as you know.
As much as I know that she's my mama's daddy's mama's mama down in Waco, Texas.
Okay.
And see, that generation, they had a way of just taking the oxygen out of stories because there's so much in there that they don't want you to know, and they don't want you to know for various reasons. But in the context, a whole lot of precious history is lost. Because everybody's got a great story. Everybody's got a great story, and everybody can tell their story. I know a lot of people who have greater stories than mine and are greater storytellers and better writers than mine. They just haven't, brought it forth. But Texas, was kind of the cesspool of lynching, and so that's another thing that comes into play on my daddy's side of the family, because they got up out of Texas, brother, when in 1916 in Paris, Texas, when, as the story I was handed to me, was that the whole town burnt down and nobody knew the reason. But that's such an incredible story in itself. Brian Grandison wants to do something right just on that, because in the late 1800s, a man named Henry Smith was brutally, savagely, cruelly executed and tortured to death. And my grandfather witnessed that. And he was always haunted by that, and we knew that. But 20 years later, bear with me now. This is this is something that Brian Grandison, he's a historian, kind of brought together, because when it came to pass that there's a mystery involved, Brian's in, so he got to do some research and come to find out that there's a article up here someplace that he dug up that indicated that the blacks that fled to Minnesota were responsible for that lynching. For that fire, right? And guess whose houses were targeted during that fire? They knew who did the lynching, and they knew where they lived. I can't hear you, man. Unmute yourself.
So those houses burned.
Yeah, something like that. And so the mystery is what it is, So they had a way of just because the whole town burned down, and Papa had to hitch up the mules and get out of town fast, and Uncle Mac sent for us. What? I mean, that's it, And then after they dead and gone, you're like, man. But what is interesting, the Zachary family?
Yeah.
Their family came up in the same situation.
Okay.
And it sounds like either Carter started that fire or Zachary did.
but either way, the fire was real.
Yeah, the fire was real. And nobody knows for sure what happened, So that's the end of that. But I always felt like my life was about something. I always felt people praying for me. I knew that my life was bigger than I am. I always had some kind of and I use the word blessing on my life.
Mm-hmm.
I've always had some kind of protection that wasn't necessarily logical by natural standards. It seemed like I had some super on my natural. You know what I'm saying? And so I've survived stuff that doesn't make sense. A lot of people read the book, say that they had to hurry up and finish reading the book before I died, before I got killed. My mama used to say I had a death wish. I'd come in the house at night, and my mama would have called the police department, the emergency rooms, all of them in the city, and even the morgue looking for me. And I come in with some more crap, whatever it is, kids come in with. And so, but my dad was, and they thought I was on drugs. I dabbled with some marijuana, but that's about it. My dad, that was kind of drugs enough. But my dad said, honey, the boy ain't on drugs. The boy just ain't got no sense. The boy ain't got no sense. And so the whole play evolves around trying to act like some good sense, trying to do, because I had my issues, L. I had severe issues, brother. We talk about ADD, ADHD, ABCD. I had the entire alphabets, brother. I had more issues than Time and Life magazines, and thoughts galore. I was what they call a problem child, and I had severe anger issues. And my dad would say, "Boy, you want me to take that fist and put it upside your head, boy? Put that fist upside my head." And then I'd get the point, Sunday, I see what they were trying to tell me, and so life goes on. I'm kind of rattling. What do you? There's so much in this story, and suddenly, somehow, after being arrested at gunpoint, being shot at by the police, and being arrested at gunpoint in like Chicago and Atlanta, and even in the military, somehow I had a record that was clean enough to get me on the police department. And my friends thought, man, you're going to join the oppressor, man. What happened to all that revolutionary talk? Now I'm thinking about changing the thing from within. And so that was a complete turnaround. And then I had some double homicides, some homicides in my family that I'm still gutted from. So I'm going to stop right now and see if I'm getting off track or something. Because
we're free to go wherever the spirit leads in this conversation is cool. And I think anything that we can share and say is cool to say and bring up. And so, I was thinking this as you were talking about your grandmother, you sparked with me something that I've done before. I'm going to do this now. And your great grandmother, your grandmother's mother's mother, right? Or your
my mama's daddy's mama's mama.
Okay. And when was she born, likely, roughly?
I guess. I guess the speculation would be like the early
1859 or 60?
I guess I'll take a stab at 1860.
60. And so she lived until what, 19 what?
67.
Okay, so she was over 100 years old.
That's what the speculation is.
Yeah.
There was no documentation of her birth.
Yeah. I have this photograph. I'm going to try to put it up here to show. And this is a picture of me sitting in the middle, cross-legged, and all my first cousins, right?
Uh-huh.
So behind me is Big Mama, my mother's mother. And to her left is the owner of the house, Mrs. Powell, and Mr. Powell, and my cousin Teola, baby sister. To her right is her mother. Her mother is Lizzie Harrison. And to the right of Lizzie is my mother, Maxine McFarlane, and the brother, I think, under me, who's Raymond. So the point of this photograph and sharing this is that I met Lizzie first when maybe this year or year before this, I went down south to Sunflower, Mississippi, and stayed maybe a week or so at the family farm. They were sharecroppers. And once I was sticking my hand into a barrel of fluffy, white, beautiful cotton, and she had a wooden spoon, cracked me across my knuckles and said, "Boy, don't put your hand in that cotton. Could be a snake in there," right? So I remember her correcting me as a child, and she came to Kansas City, where she lived till she died. Well, the point of the story is I went to see 12 Years a Slave, came back home, and this photograph I showed you has been on this mantle right behind me here for 30, 40, 50 years, right? I just took it for granted, never studied it. And I got back and I looked up and almost like the picture was glowing, Brother Melvin. And I got up and looked at it and started thinking, this great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, was born in 1860. She was born the property of another human being. And that's your experience when you said you knew your great grandma. That's a gift. The connection that you have with her,
the privilege
beyond the disconnect, is the same one that I have. Your story touches me personally because I sat and was hugged by a person and talked to by a person, held by a person who had been born owned by other human beings. And it makes me mad. It makes me mad. I'm still mad.
But man, with the snake under the house, you remember those shotgun houses?
Yeah.
I remember, I thought, because I'm from Minnesota, all the houses up here has basement. And I thought it was so cool that you could crawl from one knee underneath it and come out the other end. That was so dumb, man. I don't know. Well, I didn't realize they had snakes and scorpions and spiders down there, man. Because boys are dumb, man. All boys are dumb.
Well, the house I stayed in, when they had a small bed in the living room. It seemed like it was like a 1 or 2 room house. I can't remember. I'm like 4 years old, but I remember laying in bed and looking at the stars through the roof. That's number one. So I don't know what it did when it rained, but I know I could lay in bed and see the stars. That's what I do know. Secondly, this house had slats like diagonal across the floor and had like barrels on the 4 corners, right? So the slats were not tongue and groove. They were just set beside each other and a 1-inch space between the slats or 1/2-inch slat, and geese were under the house. And they said, put your shoes on, geese. Put your shoes on because the geese will come and snap your toes through the floor.
Yikes.
That was amazing, right?
That's amazing.
It was amazing.
I remember going to one of my houses, man. First of all, you had to go across the dirt road to the well and throw the bucket down in the well and do this stuff, get the water out, And then they had a piano that was right in the room as you walked in, and you played the piano, and all kinds of insects would fly out from behind them. And that was country. The place was so country. It was in a place called Chilton, Texas, visiting my relatives during that same trip. And it's such a country place that the people that lived there, I went back this instant to try to show me where that place was. They couldn't even find it,
Yeah.
So
my family lived in Sunflower, Mississippi, man. And the place was called the Quiver River. It was on went through the town. There's stories about that. Well, just knowing this about your family is really a gift, as I say. Let me pull up this picture here. Vosh, put this picture on the screen. Let me ask Brother Melvin to talk about this picture. I love this picture too, Brother Melvin, because I'm a Navy man too. I was in the Navy. I served on the destroyer in 1966 and 68, based in Mayport, Florida. And when I saw this picture of you promoting your play, Diesel Heart, I said, this has got to be a great front page picture for Insight News and the story we're going to do with Brother Melvin. Tell me when you settled there, tell me about this picture.
I had to move because my battery wasn't recharged, so I figured that it's better that I moved than to let that run out.
Okay.
But it's funny because that was a picture they give you in boot camp, and it was just black and white. I always hated that. That's always been my least favorite picture of myself until the history theater went and put some color to it because it was black and white, and then it gave me some dimension, and so it just befuddles me that of all the pictures that exist to me, that's the one that they got on the building.
It's a great picture.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it again, I related because it reminded me of me probably at age 18. How old were you then?
I was 19.
Okay, yeah, so same age as kind of. So talk about Diesel Heart now. Tell me about the book and what you said in the book and what you wanted to convey, and then talk about how that book, through the collaboration, became a play that's being presented now at the History Theater. What was the reason for the book, first of all? Where does the name Diesel Heart come from?
Well, I always felt I lived the story because, you keep surviving when other people don't. I mean, I had a thing for just being in some of the worst of things, and still I survived and survived kind of flamboyantly, in ways that were beyond my ability. They had nothing to do with my intellect or savvy or anything, but by virtue of God's blessing. I have to say it that way. So I knew that history was watching me, and I knew that my life meant something, and so and then you go, why, how? I don't even know what the question is, and then I presume that maybe I went through all that to share, and at the very end of the book, I hope it doesn't spoil it for anybody. That the very last sentence I let the audience know, man, this is a testimony, this is a testimony that life is worth living, and prayer is worth praying, and effort is worth, life is worth living, and that struggle is a part of life, what you can't do is give up. But the thing is, when you see the play, I hate to brag, you know that, right?
Go ahead.
But I had this gift of dropping some drops of some fisticuffs, it was a natural gift, I could have been a contender. And as I was in the Navy, I wound up embarrassing the wrong people, in the most hostile workplace environment. And
what you mean by that? To break that down?
Well, let me say this: I was undefeated in international military competition.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm just saying.
Were you fighting what, welterweight? What were you, welterweight?
Welterweight, but everything was a grudge match, and everything was race laced based, and everything was Marines versus sailors, and so I always have to give away some height and some size and some weight to get some competition. And so when you look at the picture of the book, do you have a picture? Let me get it.
No, don't leave. Okay. Okay. Oh, you got it. Okay, go ahead.
You see me standing over where let me see. You see.
Yeah,
you see,
got it. Okay.
You see 3 men in the ring.
Uh-huh.
There's a referee, 2 are boxers, one's standing up, one's on the mat.
You standing.
That's me standing. And right after I dropped him, the captain who I had accidentally humiliated, inadvertently, unintentionally, I just do my thing. He came over and he said to me, "That's the champion of the country." He's just back from the Olympics, and they didn't tell me that,
And you defeated him. You had him laid out.
Well, I claim to be undefeated, but I had a number of draws, so they call that fight a tie.
Okay.
But I didn't go down.
Uh-huh.
you know. And but he came, you know, in boxing we had this saying about taking your opponent out in the deep water and drowning him. You know, well, this knockdown was early in the bout. This when I dropped him, you know, I'm thinking, well, I'm dominating you now because man, this cat got up and took me out in the deep water and like to drown me, man. You know, he cleaned my clock in about the second round, and he had me running. He kind of took me out there, and I was able to stage a comeback in the final round, and they called it a draw. I didn't have a killer instinct. You know, I very deliberately never knocked anybody out because destroying a human being just for recreation was something I just couldn't bring myself to do. Once I saw my opponent was defeated, you know, I let it go to the referees. I let it go to the judges. You know, but in real heated fisticuffs, you know, I had no problem bringing about some injuries to an attacker. So anyway, but the play starts out. I was fighting the heavyweight. Fight before this one, I had given my opponent like 50 pounds. I lied to say I was 165, but I really wasn't quite 150. I wasn't quite $150, and he was all at 200. Bully, and he lied and said he weighed 185, and so go closer. And so the play starts out with this cat catching me with a left, a right, and a hook, you know. And I mean, brother, you know, I mean, he knocked me into a different space and time. And I had to drop deep down into the heart and come up with something. Because, you know, everybody's thinks they got a best until you get thrown in that hurricane and had to thread water with circling sharks. If whatever you thought was your best, you got to come up with a better best, you know. And so that's what my life has been about. But I want to answer your question, okay? I'm gonna take a breath because I get myself all worked up. Okay, so you see that dumb picture of me that I hated that you just flashed up here in the Navy? I was just inducted into the military, and you know how they get this mass production physical, and everybody's standing in that kitchen. I mean, there's like hundreds and hundreds of men standing around, and it's doctors going around with stethoscopes and flashlights and popsicle sticks. And clipboards, you know, and so they just go one and so they hit you and then they move on. Well, all of a sudden the stethoscope just bam hits my chest. The doctor looks, you know. And he called the other doctor over there. The other hits my chest, and so pretty soon they're having some doctor medical conversation that's above my pay grade, and pretty soon, and so they moved on. So out of all the hundreds of men that was there, they never stopped at anybody else's chest but mine. And then one of the doctors said, "You know, they got to talk down to you. He said, well, that's by the heart you got there, son. You know, got to come in." So anyway, I said, "What do you mean?" And so anyway, the final conclusion was that is something wrong? Is that bad? The final conclusion was, no, they said that my heart sounded like a diesel engine in a Mustang body. Wow. You see what I'm saying? You know, because it's a story. This story is a story about heart. And more so than anything, it's a spiritual story. It's because in the story, I eliminate the possibility that it's a story about intellect. I eliminate the possibility that's a story about opportunity. I eliminate the possibility that's a story about excellence. You know, it's a clumsy, stupid kid. You know, when I see that picture that you just hung up, the Navy 19, you know what's scary about him? You know what scares me? My whole future is in his hands, Al. You know, all the stuff that I've been able to accomplish and build around people around me is in that guy's hands.
That's weighty. That's weighty. So Diesel, the name Diesel Heart comes from that physical exam where they were marveling at the power, at the clarity, the pulsation of your heart. They probably hadn't heard something, or they'd heard hearts like this before enough to identify yours as one of the unique and rare.
It's about internal combustion, you know. It's about internal fortitude, and it's coming up with the intangible wherewithal that you need in the worst and worst of times. And so I want youth to know that they have that, and they have their precious story. And
Mhm.
talks about I admit some stuff that I'm not proud of. I'm ashamed of having broken into a house with my buddies. I'm
Mhm.
ashamed of that. But I want them to know that I share some things that I'm just embarrassed about.
Mhm.
That I had to repeat second and third grade back to back.
Mhm.
No, nobody does that.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
But also I want people to know that my mother, she was the only one that knew that I wasn't, as they say, they were testing me for considering me for being retarded.
Mhm.
My mama was the only person who knew that I had something up here, that
Mhm.
needed to be discovered. It's like mining for gold when you're trying to get into somebody's um, life and let them know and find out where their power is.
Mhm.
And another thing that happened when I got caught with that combination with a heavyweight, that's the symbolic. Everybody in your life at some point you're gonna get hit with something.
Yep.
You're gonna get hit with something. It could be some bad news. It could be loss of persons. Like my family. We've had some horrific homicides and stuff like that. We've been victimized by that.
Mhm.
And then you got to go in your heart and see what you got.
Mhm.
You got to resort in that internal combustion, that internal fortitude, and determine my life is still worth living. We have so many of us have survival guilt, like I do. I mean, among so many other things, and we have to process through that, and we have to determine what we want to do and how we're going to do it.
You did most of your military duty tour in Morocco, North Africa, right?
That's correct.
Talk about that. What was that like? How were you as a 19-year-old or 20-year-old experiencing being in Africa broadly, though some might say that Morocco doesn't see itself as Africa. Maybe it does, but I wonder. What was your experience being in the Navy and being in Morocco?
Well, first of all, I was excited to go to the motherland, to the motherland. And I got a chance to interact with people who really consider themselves African,
Mhm.
but also it was infinitely better than Vietnam. It
Mhm.
was infinitely better than combat, which I wasn't above, but I mean, I had to process. I mean, I'm not above protecting my territory, my house, my city, my state. And if I thought, give me some reason to be mad at the enemy. Convince me that we're at battle. Or scared of the enemy.
You'll
Convince me
join the
that.
fight. You'll join the fight.
Convince me that there's something. Because going and killing somebody and getting killed is a serious thing. It ain't a social thing. And so that was so much better. But the thing I would say was it was 1960, like 20 years after Truman had integrated the military forces. And I think the Navy did the worst job out of the Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, all of them in integrating in ways that were okay for those of us, and the Army, the Navy did a real wonderful job otherizing me, and so so I had one friend. God sent me one friend, and his name was Bill Huff, and because of our friendship, I kind of talked him into moving to Minnesota. He was from Camden, New Jersey. He's kind of an adopted big brother for me. But but I had some experience over there. I kind of don't want to talk about too much, because. But I did get some. Well, of course, you know what captain's mast is.
Yeah, I do.
I had me some of them.
Okay, I had one. I had one too.
Oh, you only got one.
Yeah.
Did you? and the captain said, Carter, I don't want to see you again no more. And next time he said, Carter, I told you I didn't want to see you again. It's for those of you who don't know, it's a trial for having disobeyed or for having punched the officer in the face.
Yeah. I told you offline before that when I was in the Navy, I was on a ship that was stationed in Mayport, Florida, that did a couple of Caribbean cruises and The big thing was a Mediterranean cruise. That was big. And I figured I'm Brother Melvin, 18 years old, and I'm in Spain and Italy and Greece. And I got a pocket full of money and my mama and daddy ain't around, you know. And so what do?
What do you do?
When you are 18, you got a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of money, right? And no mama, no daddy, right? You do, you have fun. So, but the story I tell people about that being Vietnam era, I was active duty from 66 to 68. That was the Vietnam era. In fact, the ship that I was on after I got off got shipped to deployed to Vietnam. I never went there. So I tell people the only fighting I did in the Navy was fighting white boys on my ship, because whenever we pulled into a town, like it could have been the port of Malta or the Crete or Piraeus in Athens, Greece, after 2 or 3 beers, white boys get sloppy drunk and they feel at liberty to call us a bunch of N-words, right? And expect us to go along with it. 7 black people on my ship out of 300, the compliment. And we kind of had a pact. The minute they say it, fight. And so before the NIG could be fully formed and said, somebody was getting busted upside their head. And all of us knew what the drill was, and everybody jumped in and piled on. And we had a bunch of fights, both on the beach. We had fights. We had epic fights in Malta, also in Crete, on the boat between the shore and the ship. Fights on the ship itself. So that's the battle I did, fighting white people who felt they had the opportunity or the authority to otherize me and to demean and devalue me. That's my story about the military.
Well, I mean, I can relate to that because I told you I kind of quick with the fisticuffs, and my deal was to not let them get to the second syllable.
Yeah, right.
Something happened sometimes, and on one occasion, they were making fun of this. We were in the enlistment club, and this young lady, I liked her friendly, and I respected her, but she wasn't real attractive. She was kind of skinny, and she was dancing on the dance floor by herself, and some sailors across the dance floor were making ape sounds, and which I took personally, and I didn't want them to hurt her feelings. And so I kind of surreptitiously walked over to them and told them, man, you guys, whatever I said, I don't know what I said, but I challenged them. You can't make fun of her. Don't make fun of her. And one guy needed to get to that first syllable. And a big old backhand came out and caught him in such a way that I don't know where it came from, but he was on the floor flopping around like a crappie on the bottom of a boat, Yep. and everybody, give me some air, and man, oh my God, I didn't know, I mean, my hand just did it, Yeah. And so I crept on out because everybody was giving him first aid now, and I went on out the door, and I was rushing out the door, the enlistment club. Shore patrols rushing in there with helmets on and everything. I said, the fight's that way. and so I went on and minded my own business. But that was in New London, Connecticut.
Yeah. Well, me and my buddy in Malta, same situation. This time the white guys were making fun of a brother on our team, one of our group. But he was like a giant. This guy named Gardner from New York City, from Brooklyn, I think, was like 6'4", 6'5", but he's kind of got a shaped like Baby Huey, the cartoon, right? And he was jovial. He was a nice guy, but because he was so big, people felt they could pick on him, right? And this guy was powerful, and something happened, and somebody tried to step him the wrong way, and we knew that if he hit somebody, he would hurt him. So we holding him back, trying to keep him from, doing this. Because we knew if he did that, people would go flying. Shore patrol comes in, reaching over our head, trying to hit him with the nightstick, right?
Yeah.
And we fight a wedge out of this building, and down the street, split up. He goes one way with a couple of people to get him to the ship. without getting, tagged, and me and another buddy go another way. And after about a block or two, we say, why are we running? We didn't do nothing. And we stopped. But this time the short patrol catches up with us with the batons drawn, attempting to effect an arrest. And here's how the spirit works, brother. I said, we're not running no more. Let's talk about this. And they stop in midair, and a speech comes out of nowhere. And it goes back to what my grandpa used to say, don't worry about what to say. Open your mouth and I'll put the words in your mouth. That's exactly what happened. And so I just began talking, and it wasn't me talking. The spirit was talking. These guys froze in midair. They didn't kill us. They could have killed us. They didn't do it. They could have beat us badly. They didn't do it. They didn't touch us. And by the time this speech that had to use this moment to reveal itself wound up, I said, that's it. And my buddy said, Mac, keep talking, man. Keep talking. But I had no more
he said.
I had no more to say. By this time, an officer rolled up on these white guys and said, let these guys go. That's how we walked back to the ship. But that's the story. Talk about being a police officer. Then we got about 5 or a few more minutes than that. And I want to get into your career, highlights of it as a police officer in St. Paul. And obviously, I don't want to end the show without talking about all the power connection that the Carter brand represents. Your son is the mayor of St. Paul. Your wife was the county commissioner for Ramsey County.
The first Black county commissioner in the state of Minnesota.
And the first chairperson of the county board of Ramsey County. So I want to mention all those things as well. But talk about your being a policeman. How did you bring that Navy, that street experience, the things you say, sometimes you're not comfortable talking about? How did all that evolve into you deciding to be a police officer? And what have been the rewards of your work as a officer of the law in St. Paul?
Well, there's a time in everybody's life when you have to make your decision on who you're going to be and what you're going to do, and whether people like it or not. Whether it may not even be consistent with how you lived and what you've done. My best friends were on the other side of the law, and on one side, my best friends were Black Panthers on the other side. And so I had to make a decision to, as it said, join the oppressor, and seek change from within. So I put myself on a self-appointed undercover mission to infiltrate policing, not to praise Caesar. Have you ever read the book? You might know the story, The Spook That Sat by the Door.
I know the book. I didn't read it, but I know the story.
Yeah, well, I gave myself that assignment. Infiltrate and bring about change. And so you had to kind of drink the blue water, You had to kind of sip the blue Kool-Aid, and some of it, a lot of it really made some sense, because I was in a position, I positioned myself to be able to do a whole lot of things for my community that I would not done otherwise. In my mind, I policed my city in a way that's a community policing. I was one of the one or two officers that actually lived in the city, in the area where I policed and patrolled, and I raised my kids there. On a couple of occasions, some bullets would hit my house. One seemed like was a retaliation for a pretty bad guy that I had arrested at one point in time. And the bullet wedged about a foot and a half from my son's bunk bed. Somebody's coming into the door. Here come. But anyway, so we had put a house up for sale and decided we're going to move. But then we decided, no, we're going to stay here and make this place keep it the place that nurtured me. The thought of me leaving my city to whomsoever just was scary for me, so I felt that a lot of these cops lived on the other side of Wisconsin and came from way out. Some guys drove like hours or so to get to their work and back, and for me that was an obscenity. And so my house became this resource for people, because everybody knew where I lived. The mayor, the governor, even back then, all the, everybody just knew where I lived because it was kind of out in a plain view kind of place. I'm gonna put you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, I told her, but my house became kind of a holding station, because people knew where I lived. So mothers were bringing me their kids to talk to, and to and sometimes to arrest. Sometimes women would come here fleeing from abusive husbands, and people come here fleeing different kinds of danger and needing different kinds of help. Oftentimes we'd get a phone call in the middle of the night, and I'd wind up trying to. And so about that same time, the street gang thing became, and the drugs came, and mothers trusted me in such a way that I had a level of trust because I grew up with everybody, and everybody, we do walk together and we socialize. But when mothers knew and grandmothers and aunts knew when their nephew and their son had crossed the line, or when they were straddling the line, and oftentimes that's when they would call me, and even when they're about to commit crimes, mothers would call me and let me know. Even when there was about to be some shooting, the mothers would call me, and so and I get calls from both sides of the gang
conflict.
And I go back and forth. A lot of times I had a softball and a hardball pitch, because look, you guys, they'll stop if you stop. You give me a word that they'll, because oftentimes, kids don't want to do stuff that they're kind of poised to do. And so I'd go back and forth. And so, like, particularly one time in particular, there was supposed to be some shooting up on Central and St. Albans. And I told these guys, both sides of the family, you guys, I gave them a soft pitch, and I said, but if you show up there, I'm gonna be there. And if you show up, I'm gonna presume that you come to commit a crime, and I'm gonna presume that you are armed.
Melvin, let me stop you right there. This is a fascinating conversation. I think it's one that we should continue and explore. I'm enjoying the conversation, but we are unfortunately out of time.
Oh, today. Man, I'm getting wound up.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest, the very special, elegant, and exceptional Melvin Carter Jr. Brother Melvin, thank you so much for taking this time. I want to remind people to go to the History Theater through this Saturday to check out Diesel Heart. It's his story. It's a great story. It's really our story. And I will see you here tomorrow for The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Take care.